Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to round 6 of the 939 Corse AROC Touring Car Championship. I am aware we are having a couple of issues with the stream, but I thought I'd just get things started before we continue on, or before you wonder where I have gone. I am aware we are dropping some frames, but I will seek to get that resolved as quickly as possible. But yes, round 6 here at Jeddah. It will be a very interesting one indeed. Of course, a circuit we visited just a week ago in the single-seater action. But of course, this is a very different, kettle of fish, really, with the touring cars. Almost, in a way, treat it like a different circuit because, as I say, nature of these cars very different to those single-seaters, high downforce, open-wheel cars here. Much longer laps in these cars. And probably a lot more challenges through the corners as well. There are 27 corners on this circuit, and you can ignore quite a number of them really in a relatively quick single-seater car. But here in this 75, apologies, 75 in the 155 CR. God, that takes me back to the 75 days. Yes, here in this 155, it will be a little bit more of a challenging circuit for these touring cars. I do apologise once again for the technical issue. We'll get the resolved in just a second. This stream was doomed from the start, so we have 10 minutes to go in qualifying. I'll just give you a quick update. It is Barry Clayton on provisional pole, Alan Matthews P2, Paul Brady P3, Will Inglis P4, Andrew Whitehead P5, Jack Hodson P6, Nathan Birch P7, Greg Young P8, Paul Millman P9, Steve Knight leading the AM charge in P10. On the grid, Rosie Hodson P11, Andrew Brammer P12, and Guy Sprawbrick P13, and then we have an appearance from Matt Daly as well. So that is the rundown. But yes, this stream somewhat cursed by the looks of things. Not only did we have an SSD failure right before we were due to start, and not just any SSD, the SSD upon which Assetto resides on my computer, we also had some issues with me being able to get in and out of my own home, which we'll delve into in just a moment's time. But I'm very tempted to go on board with Matt Daly. I do apologise once again for the slight lag, the approximately about 25% of the frames are currently being dropped by the stream. Matt Daly currently looking like he's dropped his car a little bit there, carrying some damage. We'll get that resolved for you now, but I'll do that in the background while we have a look at Matt Daly, who I suspect should be rather sharp here in this car going around this circuit. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I do apologise for the small delay in proceedings there. We've got 3 minutes to go in qualifying. I can tell you that at the moment is in fact, I can tell you in just a brief second, is Barry Clayton, who currently sits on provisional pole. However, Alan Matthews very close behind, looking to take that thrown away from him as he crosses the line and goes and sets a 2 minute 15.839. That is still a few tenths off where he needs to be, though, in order to get ahead of Barry Clayton this time round. We're going board then with Will Inglis at this point in time, who is heading round the final corner and is looking to try and eclipse those two in front of him. He's currently running P3 in this session, has a 2 minute 15.5 to beat, and crosses the line with a 2. Doesn't cross the line quite yet. He's going to cross the line with a 2 minute 15.7. That sees him P2 in this session for the time being. Yes, apologies if you've only just joined or wondering what's going on the stream. A couple of technical issues. We have now resolved that, slightly lower quality, so I do apologise for that. But we are underway after an SSD failure and my own inability to get inside my own house, which is actually all to blame. It can all be blamed upon my alpha, so we'll delve into that in just a moment. But we are at Jeddah, which will be very interesting indeed in the 155 Ti, because it kind of turns the circuit into a little bit of a different beast in comparison to the RSS Supreme. Corners that you don't have to contemplate really in the RSS. You have to think about a lot more in this lower downforce, slightly less, shall we say, race-ready car. Although look at it, it's very race-prepped indeed. It's a fantastic looking car there, but it's just not quite a thoroughbred machine as much as the RSS Supreme is, of course. And it is Barry Clayton who still sits on provisional pole at this point in time. We've got 1 minute to go in the session, and where is Barry Clayton? We'll try and jump on board with him. Matt Daly, actually, I want to give a mention to, is currently 9th, is heading towards the end of the lap now. Just a couple of seconds to go as he crosses the line in just a minute. Has to watch out for that pit lane line there. But as he crosses the line, where will Matt Daly go? He's always a latecomer into the qualifying sessions, but it's a 2 minute. I can tell you it is a 2 minute 17.8. That sees him in 6th on the road here, on the grid rather. Ignore what you can see in the timing screen on the left hand side there. Well, apologies if you ignore the timing tower. I can tell you according to the timing screen, it is a P6 for Matt Daly at this point in time. As Jack Hodson improves to go 4th fastest now, 2:16.4 sees him in P4. Now Nathan Birch putting on board with him, obviously in the 939 Corse team, alongside Greg Young. He is going to come across the line in just a moment's time. And will it be an improvement for Nathan Birch? We'll find out in just a second. For Nathan Birch, it was a big loss through that final sector. I think something went wrong on that last lap, so Nathan Birch stays where he is at the moment. Who else do we have coming across the line? We have Will Inglis, our current, is now provisional pole sitter. Was P2 for the time being, is now on provisional pole. That's all he needs to do in this session, he feels. Abandons the lap. What can Alan Matthews do to fight him? Not looking great on this lap. What can Barry Clayton do? Barry Clayton currently running in P2. It's a 2 minute 15.5 is his best. Will Inglis into the 2 minute 14's exceptional lap from him. As we remain on board with Barry Clayton, has some traffic in the form of Jack Hodson to contend with. Matt Daly, meanwhile, setting purple sectors. Where is Barry Clayton? He is a little bit behind Matt Daly. We're going to jump on board with Matt Daly then. Currently P7 on the road at the moment. Let's see if he can improve. I feel like he can. That was a blistering sector 2, a 40.4 through that middle sector there. Sees him fastest out of everyone. Purple sector 2 for Matt Daly then, as we head round the turns 26 running down towards turn 27 in just a moment's time. Long sweeping left-hander in these cars, which must feel like it goes on for an absolute age. One of the longest circuits that we visit on any calendar here at Jeddah. The Jeddah Corniche circuit. Then we come around the final corner, back onto the throttle with Matt Daly. Only 10 seconds or so to go. It must seem like an eternity though, as you run all the way down to that start-finish line there. Who is that heading into P3? That is Andrew Whitehead. We go back on board with Matt Daly. There's a big collision at the end of the circuit there, but Matt Daly doesn't quite beat Will Inglis, but he gets oh so close. It's 2 minute 15.03 for Matt Daly. That is P2 with only 6 laps on the board. That is a very impressive effort indeed from Matt Daly. We only have Jack Hodson left on track now. Barry Clayton wasn't able to improve by looking things towards the end, unfortunately for him. Remains in P3 at the moment, and Jack Cotton abandons the run there. So that is the order then. Winning list takes pole position here at Jeddah. Matt Daly is in P2, Alan Matthews in P3. Rob Whitney, apologies, Andrew Whitehead P4, Jack Hodson P5, Guy Swarwick P6, Greg Young P7, Steve Knight in P8, Paul Milne in P9, and that is completely wrong because I've read the wrong thing again. But that is another small technical niggle that we've had here in qualifying. We'll get those resolved out for race 1 coming up in just a moment's time, so don't go anywhere. It should be a fantastic and quite interesting evening racing here at the Jeddah Corniche circuit. And welcome back to the action, ladies and gentlemen. Just over 30 seconds now until lights out, and it is Will Inglis and Matt Daly lining up, completing the front row here, in what should be a very interesting evening's racing in these 155 Ti's. Obviously, plenty of power on board, which will certainly help on these long straights, but they are very long straights indeed. In some ways, could almost rival Spa. So it will make for some interesting racing. You don't have the benefit of push to pass either, like we do in the RSS Supremes. Let's see how the drivers negotiate this. One interesting thing will be the strategy. It's all to play for here in this race. We have 6 red lights on the gantry, and we are away then. Not much in the form of tyre smoke off any driver, in fact. Seems to be a fairly clean getaway for everyone. Matt Daly just about looking like he was going to edge out in front. Has the inside there, but Will Inglis hanging around the outside through the first corner is set up nicely for that second corner and takes the lead, or rather makes sure he has the lead as we head later into the lap. There has been contact further down the field. It is between Paul Brady, Paul Milman, Guy Swarbrick involved in there somewhere as well, but has still made a good start nonetheless. And actually, for all drivers, all things considered, 15 cars heading through turn 1 at the Jeddah Corniche circuit, a very clean getaway. So all the drivers can be commended for that one. As we have a mixture of strategy here. We have Andrew Whitehead running the soft compound tyre. He's the only driver in the soft compound tyre, as something's happened to Jack Hodson there. What a shame to start his race in that manner. Meanwhile, Matt Daly and Alan Matthews battling it out then. Matt Daly has the inside line as we head down towards the middle sector of the lap. We are, in fact, slap bang in the middle of the middle sector of the lap now, and battling for P3 at one point. Matt Daly now fancies his chances, trying to get the overtake complete on Will Inglis. Our race leader has a look up the inside there. Is too far back there to get anything done, and now we wait to run down towards one of the higher speed sections of the circuit. Will Inglis able to break away from that then, about 0.8 of a second now. Alan Matthews now fancying his chances, battling with Matt Daly. Not to be outdone though, Andrew Whitehead is very much in the mix, has the advantage of that soft compound tyre as well, and should be able to make good progress here. Let's see if he can use his advantage while he has it, because of course later into the race he might be struggling somewhat, and he is a bit of a low ranger there, the only driver on the soft compound tyre. It will be very interesting to see his progress later on. Matt Daly then able to make sure he retains that P2 as Alan Matthews drops back ever so slightly, now very much under pressure from Andrew Whitehead as we head down towards the final corner of the first lap of this race. Nathan Birch not too far behind the lead 939 Corse car there. Not sure what's happened to Greg Young there, but that car is looking a little bit worse for wear. Look at the front end there, the front bumper detached, the rear wing detached, in fact the rear, the boot. Actually completely separated there, so that car has seen better days. Now heading down the straights, it is Matt Daly versus Will Inglis. Now, is that a better run out of the final corner? I certainly think so, because it doesn't look like that car is any faster in the straights. Matt Daly's, that is. It looks to be that the setup all fairly consistent throughout most of the field. In this race, we're not going to see quite the extremes that we saw in the single-seater action. So Matt Daly then, just with the advantage of a very slight slipstream, able to gain a little bit of time. Let's see what he can do now as we head through the twisty part of of Sector 1 rather. Sector 1, arguably the most technical and complicated part of the circuit for these cars. In fact, for any car really, here at the Jeddah Corniche circuit. So as we settle into the race, now we are nearly, just over 3 minutes in fact, and Matt Daly still putting the pressure on Will Inglis as we head down through the second sector once again. Now only 0.4 of a second separate these two cars as Nathan Birch has found his way past Barry Clayton. No, in fact, it's Barry Clayton finding his way past Nathan Birch. They are side by side as they head round that long sweeping hairpin. You can't really have a sweeping hairpin, but it's a relatively long hairpin. But Nathan Birch able to defend the position. 0.3 now separating Matt Daly and Will Inglis as we head down through the second sector. Going to be getting to one of the higher speed parts of the circuit now, so any extra momentum will play a key part in getting this overtake completed, and Matt Daly certainly seems to have it. He's having a look around the outside, but as we saw in last week's racing, that wall on that corner certainly creeps up on you rather quickly, and that can spell the end, in fact, for some drivers' races. We saw that very nearly happen in last week's racing in the single-seater, and we could have seen a repeat of that again with Matt Daly, but he was very diligent and was able to back out as Barry Clayton and Nathan Birch have a coming together in their battle. What a great shame to see their battle coming to a bit of a premature end there. That is a disaster. I'm sure they're not best pleased with how that has spelled out. Nathan Birch still, in fact, not able to recover. This is not great for his race. Can he get underway? Not yet. He's finally back on the road, but for the 939 Corse team, Greg Young in the pits, Nathan Birch down in P13. This is going to be a disaster of a day. This is not how they want to start their racing. Arguably the strongest team in the Constructors, of course. One of the few teams in the Constructors, in fact. Not that we really pay too much attention to that. It is not great for the season, that is for sure. As Willingless now extending his lead ever so slightly. It seems to be a lot of kind of a concertina almost between the top three here. As Matt and Daly at some points looking like he's dropping back ever so slightly, potentially falling into the jaws of Alan Matthews. But we see, here we go once again, heading through Sector 1. He's catching now as we run towards Sector 2 in just a moment's time. Now within 1 second, there's a potentially a little bit of oversteer kicking in for Willingless there. Looking like the back end stepping out. That's going to slow him down ever so slightly. Matt Daly once again, now within 0.6 of a second. That 1.2 second gap between Matt Daly and Willingless is now shared between Willingless and Alan Matthews. Alan Matthews isn't too concentrated on what's going on in turn 1, or rather for P1, because he's very much concentrating on trying to keep that rather grippy Andrew Whitehead behind. Andrew Whitehead, of course, on the soft compound tyre. We have seen this on a couple of occasions now. Andrew Whitehead seems to be, shall we say, somewhat out there in terms of his strategy choices, and it's good to see. It adds a little bit of variety into the action. Let's see how these soft compound tyres treat him. He's a very experienced driver now at this point in time. Maybe he can manage those soft tyres well. It's certainly providing him with some great pace. He's just set a purple Sector 1, a 38.4 through that first sector on the track here. Let's see what it does now through the middle sector. Of course, I expect the advantage to slightly wane as we head through Sector 2 and Sector 3. That's all about straight line speed. It's the slower, more twisty parts of the track where you've got heavy braking zones, you've got very quick corner exits rather, where you've got to get the power down nice and sharpish from a low speed. That will make the difference on the soft compound tyres. I don't expect the advantage to be all there towards the end of the lap, and we are seeing that now with Andrew Whitehead still posting personal bests, but not purple sectors as we head into the later part of the lap. Speaking of heading into the later part of the lap, Matt Daly and Alan Matthews are doing so side by side with Willingless, and a great move on the outside late on the brake sees Matt Daly just about eking out in front now. But on the exit of the corner, we've seen Willingless enjoying this battle before. Just think to last week between Alan Matthews and Willingless when they were battling out down this long straight for the win. It's going to be for P1 once again, but this time Matt Daly is going to take that P1. 2/10 now separating Willingless and Matt Daly. Will Willingless try and replicate that move heading into turn 1? He can't from that far back. Matt Daly then takes the race 1 P1 at this point in time, and there's not too much by the looks of things that Willingless can do. Although, having said that, a small amount of oversteer did creep in on the exit of turn 1 there, and there is Willingless now very much on the rear wing of Matt Daly's 155 Ti. Alan Matthews, meanwhile, having his own battle with Andrew Whitehead. Andrew Whitehead being forced to go the long way around there. Had to, I imagine, quite vigorously jump on the brakes there to make sure he didn't end up in the wall, and has done so, has lost a lot of time as a result now, and at this point I expect the soft compound advantage, maybe not quite at this point, but they're not going to be as fresh as they once were, let's just put it that way. We are now 8 minutes into this race. We're not going to get 17 laps like we got in the single-seaters, but I expect maybe that advantage to slightly disappear from Andrew Whitehead's car. And just look at that. How's that upset his momentum? Has he lost his rhythm a little bit? He's now 4 seconds off the lead of this race. At one point, he was only 1.5. He's starting to drop back already. Let's see, meanwhile, what Willingless can do. Willingless, I'm sure, not best pleased with his current situation, potentially having to defend from Alan Matthews. Meanwhile, Matt Daly able to just run it out in front with no major challenge if he is able to get the good laps in. And that is a DNF for Nathan Birch. What a shame for the 939 Corse team. I suspect Greg Young has in fact exited the pits and will be getting some practice in for race 2. He's in good stead for race 2, of course. He will have the advantage of if things stay this way, he will be on pole for the reverse grid race coming up later into the evening. But here we are, side by side, Matt Daly and Willingless battling out, then Willingless taking back the race lead at this point in time. How long can he keep it though? Because Matt Daly has some great pace underneath in purple Sector 1 on this lap. Not to be outdone, Willingless hoping to get into the 2:16 range for the first time in this race. His best lap already, Matt Daly's best lap rather, at 2:16.8. Let's see what Willingless can do now as we exit the final corner, and it's Willingless who's taken back the lead of this race. It's still his lead at this point in time. Let's see how long that remains the case. Meanwhile, Andrew Whitehead and Andrew Brammer battling out in that Martini livery 155, which has got to be one of my favourites of the season. But here we see Matt Daly now side by side. Will he get the nose out in front? Who's going to be later onto the brakes into that first corner? It's Willingless who is able to defend well. And now we see Willingless starting next lap in the lead of this race. Although, watch out, we've seen Matt Daly very strong through this first sector. In fact, there is Matt Daly having a look around the outside potentially. No, he's a little bit too far back. Has the inside for this corner, though. Has Willingless washed out wide? It looks like he has. That might have cost him in terms of pace. No wonder, though. No worry, though, rather. This track kind of snakes and twists and turns around back on you. And if you've had the outside for one corner, chances are you can have the inside for the next one in just a moment, in just a few seconds. And that was the case for Willingless. He leads this race once again and now has a 1 second gap down to Matt Daly. Matt Daly and Alan Matthews now settling in for a bit of a battle here. This could compromise Matt Daly's attempt at taking the race lead back quite considerably if Alan Matthews can get out in front. In fact, Alan Matthews could rather spoil Matt Daly's day here. In fact, don't count him out for the lead of this race. If he's got the pace to match Matt Daly, what's to say he's not going to be able to catch up to Willingless? And then Willingless could drop behind Matt Daly. Anything could happen here in this race. Speaking of which, Andrew Brammer, something's happened between him and Andrew Whitehead. He's now got ahead of Andrew Whitehead. Andrew Brammer up into P4, 4 tenths separating these two drivers now. Meanwhile, Alan Matthews in P3, Matt Daly in P2, only 1 tenth separating these two, and he's going to have the inside is Matt Daly. Will that be enough though at this spot on the circuit? No, it will not. He's going to have the run down all the way to the end of the lap is Willingless. A bit of oversteer creeping in for Matt Daly. That could cost him in terms of momentum. There is Alan Matthews right on his rear wing. Matt Daly's car looking a little bit upset actually as we head into the later part of the lap now. Willingless looking brilliant out in front here. It's going to be near enough 3 wide heading into this final corner now, because there is Alan Matthews alongside Matt Daly. Matt Daly trying to get alongside Willingless. There's snaking and weaving heading into that final corner. Willingless maintains the lead. Alan Matthews briefly jumps into P2, but it's still Willingless P1, Matt Daly P2, Alan Matthews P3 as we head down the start-finish straight once again. A little bit of rear damage for Willingless' car. I don't think it's too much in terms of aero. That's more just visual, so it shouldn't cost him too much down the straights or through the corners. Hopefully not. Anyway, that would be a bit of an unfortunate case for his race as we head back into turn 1 once again. Just look at how much the leaders have slowed themselves down in all of this battling. And Matt Daly, Alan Matthews slowing themselves down even more. Alan Matthews now into P2 with Matt Daly for one of the first major moments in this race, all the way down in P3. I say all the way down, that's only 1 second off the lead of this race. Andrew Brammer, meanwhile, comfortably ahead of Andrew Whitehead. At this point now, those soft tyres will be starting to wear off, and Andrew Whitehead might just have to settle in and try and focus on looking after the tyres, conserving the rubber that he's got on the wheels, and trying to make sure he's got enough pace towards the end of the race to not have to worry about Paul Brady here. Is that Paul Brady? No, I might have been completely mistaken. Apologies, I have. Paul, I've been calling you Andrew Brammer the entire time, and apologies, Andrew, I've been calling you Paul the entire time. So Paul Brady now ahead of Andrew Whitehead in the Martini liveried car, and then Andrew Brammer. It's going to be the one that Andrew Whitehead's going to have to watch out for in this race. Meanwhile, further down the run, we have Paul Millman in P8, trying his best to defend from Barry Clayton and Guy Swarbrick. Some very pacey drivers here. We know that Barry Clayton certainly had the pace to challenge in qualifying. The race not starting the way that he would have wanted, though, and now he's doing his best to hunt down Paul Millman. Not to be outdone, though, Guy Swarbrick in the mix here, leading the AM charge at this point in time with a fairly comfortable margin, it must be said. And he is in the mix, potentially get an overtake on these two if these two slow each other down enough with their battling. Not to be outdone, though, is Alan Matthews, only about a second off the lead of the race, although it looks to be that Matt Daly is very much keeping him in check. I was about to say that was a fairly action-packed and exciting start to the race, but you can't really call it the start if it's halfway. If it's half race distance. It's just been a fantastic race so far. I hope you've enjoyed watching it as much as I have. As Greg Young, Rosie Hodgson having some issues there. Contact between the two, and this is a disaster of a race for Greg Young. Maybe just a track that he's not quite gelling with for whatever reason. This race not going his way. Hopefully his fortune's turning around for race 2, the reverse grid race, because he does have some good pace underneath him, does Greg Young. Some good points on the board in the championship as well, and he'll be hoping to increase those as we head further into the season. Can you believe already at the halfway point in this season as we go on board with Will Inglis. Still, around about 8 tenths between him and Alan Matthews. That gap expanding and contracting depending on where we are on the track. He's not. It's not an amazing news for his races. He's not breaking away just yet. In fact, only half a second as we are on board with him now. He's clearly got the pace, so it's not all doom and gloom, but he certainly can't relax in that car. He's got another 10 minutes of flat-out driving to try and keep Alan Matthews and Matt Daly behind. And I'm very glad we were able to jump in on this stream, because it almost didn't happen, and that would have been a shame, because it has been a fantastic race so far. We had some, obviously, issues with the connection. I do apologise for that if you were slightly confused what was going on throughout qualifying, or if you missed some of the qualifying action, having a couple of connection issues. Before that, one of my SSDs decided it didn't want to boot, and before that, my Alpha decided it didn't want me to do the stream, really. How so, you asked? Did it break down? Nope. So everyone knows if you've got a Giulietta or a Mito, that era Alpha, the bottom kind of plastic ring on the key has a tendency to wear out and snap, and that definitely happened on my key, shall we say, as Matt Daly sets the purple sector 1 here. I was heading back through the house, putting some shopping in. Just before the stream, got a shopping, to get the essential streaming supplies, the snacks, the food, the multiple bottles of wine. Joking. Although it might sound like it sometimes, I'm not on the ale in the middle of the stream. However, I left the keys in the front door as I went through to put all the stuff in, and rather sillily closed the front door with the keys in the door from inside the house. Now that wouldn't have been an issue because on my front door I can unlatch from inside the house. However, at that precise moment in time, the key decided to disintegrate at the bottom, and that had wedged the key between the door handle and the wall of the house, which meant I was no longer able to unlock the door. I was trapped inside the house, and obviously the car was unlocked and everything. So luckily, able to solve it, able to get free access in and out of my house about 2 minutes before the stream started. So it was somewhat of a miracle that the stream even begun, but it has now, and I'm very glad, because it has been an exciting action-packed race so far. As we see, Guy Throbber getting ahead of Paul Millman now. Paul Millman potentially not quite having the pace of the cars around him. Guy Throbber looking very impressive in this race indeed. Of course, some of the drivers, not all of them, are in the RSS series. Some of them somewhat familiar now with this circuit. It's certainly a unique track. As we see Paul Millman now fighting Guy Throbber heading into turn 1. It's a unique track. It will be a slightly different beast, as we've alluded to before, in the 155 Ti, but some drivers already coming into this weekend with some track experience. I don't believe, actually, the Jeddah Corniche... Oh dear, that is a big impact for Guy Throbber. Not sure what happened there. If he wasn't already missing out on some front aero, which I suspect might have been the reason why that incident happened, he certainly will be now. And in fact is now missing out on some rear aero just for his troubles. As we now see him dropping back behind Paul Millman. Still leading the AM race though, so can't complain too much. But yes, I don't think we've actually seen the Jeddah Corniche circuit run anything other than a Formula 1 car before. So this is a very interesting experiment indeed, as Alan Matthews and Matt Daly are battling it out now, heading down towards the turn 22, turn 23 part of the circuit. Only 0.2 of a second separating these two drivers. It is Alan Matthews out in front. Matt Daly, of course, P2 on the grid in qualifying, currently P3 in the race. He's dropped backwards ever so slightly, but that is only owing to the fact that he's had some very skilled competition around him in this race. He's run down towards turn 27 once again, and they are going to be side by side. Matt Daly has the outside this time around. Could that benefit him though on corner exit? Could he do a bit of a switchback if he's late on the brakes? Let's just see. He's going to try it. He's going to go around the outside late on the brakes, gets a nose out in front ever so slightly, runs wide though, has gone in too aggressive, too deep into the corner. And has he had a bit of an impact there? He has. He's taken a section of his front wing off. That is a disaster for Matt Daly. At one point fighting for the race lead, now finds himself 6 seconds off the lead of the race, and potentially going to be snapped up by the jaws of Paul Brady here. Paul Brady running down towards turn 1, benefiting from the slipstream of Matt Daly. We weren't expecting that in this race, but now Alan Matthews can rest easy, and that is not what Will Inglis wants to see, I am for sure. He's probably looking in that rear view mirror and now slightly panicking. Although many drivers often panicking to see Matt Daly's very bright yellow luminescent car in their rearview mirror, he's now panicking to see the fact that that Matt Daly is not in his rearview mirror, because he was potentially the only way to kind of halt or slow the progress of Alan Matthews. Alan Matthews can now completely settle in and focus on what is going on with the car in front. He's still staying at about 1.7 seconds, that delta between him and Willingless, so not quite closing up just yet, but let's see what he can do now without the threat, without having to worry about defending, as Guy Swarbrick has another issue, I believe. He has been able to restart, which is good. Shouldn't be a hazard on track. Of course, that is another thing to factor in here at the Jeddah Corniche circuit. Again, a little bit less of a concern in a slower car, not quite like the RSS Supreme. You don't have to worry too much about cars being stuck on track. You've got a much lower closing speeds, and you've got a much lower likelihood of cars being lapped. As we see Barry Clayton dropping now behind both Guy Swarbrick and Paul Millman, and coming to a bit of a stop there. Not sure what's going on. Is able to resume, which is good to see. But yes, it's not quite as much of a concern to have kind of cars parked on the track. You've much lower closing speeds, much more time to consider what's going on. So it's not quite the hazard that we do see usually at the Jeddah Corniche circuit. Which brings us back to, it is interesting to see that only F1 cars have ran beforehand. Of course, the first F1 car was an AT0 Williams of some description. Apologies, I can't quite remember the car, but that was the very first F1 machinery to actually spin wheels here at the Jeddah Corniche circuit. Very interesting course on race weekend of the 2021 season, but still very interesting that it wasn't a brand spanking new car. It's brand spanking new circuit, and this will of course be the first time that a touring car has in any serious kind of guise ran along. We did have some road cars visiting in this year's Grand Prix, but not quite the same as these fine retro race machines. Alan Matthews, for a brief moment, looked like he was getting within a second, has got within a second once again, but Willingless now controlling this race quite nicely, I would say. And this gives us a very short kind of opportunity to have a look at what is going on in the championship, of course. Unfortunately, I did miss last week's racing, but I can tell you that it was Nathan Birch who took the race 1 victory. John Cole, with his impressive form, unfortunately not here this evening, taking the race 2 victory, so that will allow the likes of Willingless, Matt Daly, Alan Matthews to close up, to bridge that gap to John Cole in this evening's racing. I just want to mention, though, speaking of John Cole's form, we sing his praises constantly on the stream, but I should mention that this and Poe are the only two occasions, so this being Jeddah and Poe, are the only two occasions in which John Cole has not taken pole position in qualifying. He's been on brilliant form so far this season. Willingless obviously taking pole here, and then Andrew Whitehead taking pole in Poe as well. As there's contact with the wall for Willingless, that could upset him quite considerably. That is not what he needs at this stage in the race. Only 3 minutes ago, and much like we saw in race 1 last week, could we have Willingless, a small mistake from him late into the race, potentially costing him the race victory now? Because from 8 tenths down, Alan Matthews now finds himself only 2 tenths down. Make that 5 tenths as we head later into the lap, but still, that is going to spur Alan Matthews on. In fact, Willingless potentially controlling it quite nicely, all things considered. There's a little bit more front aero damage for Willingless in this race now. That is not what he needs at this point in time. Let's see how he manages this then. He seems to have controlled things, but for a moment he had us worried. It could have been a late race turnaround once again for Willingless. Not to be outdone, Matt Daly potentially falling into the jaws of Paul Brady at one point. He's busy setting purple sectors, though. His previous lap was his best lap at 2:16.1. Can he better it on this lap? Well, he's just posted a 38.3, purple sector 1, lost out through sector 2. But if you look at the predicted in the bottom left-hand corner, he's predicted to jump into the 2:15s, which would be an impressive qualifying time. And he does so, sets the new fastest lap of the race, and closes up the gap between him and Alan Matthews quite considerably now, as it stands at about 1.6 seconds. Meanwhile, Alan Matthews and Willingless only half a second separating them as we start the 10th lap of this race. So let's see what tricks Willingless has up his sleeve now to keep the very spurred on Alan Matthews behind him. As we have a look at that, we also have a very quick look at the championship standings. It is, of course, John Cole who leads, 192 points to his name. Matt Daly, 149. Alan Matthews, 134 in P3. Nathan Birch, 118 in P4. Greg Young, P5, 82. George Brooke-Batterby, P6. Andrew Whitehead, P7. And then we have Paul Brady, P8. And then we have Jack Hodson, P9. Willingless, P10, 38 points. This race could be such a difference to his championship standings if he can maintain this lead now, although this lead is very much looking under threat. Andrew Harvey P11, Andrew Bremer P12, Rob Whitney P13, Paul Milburn P14, Barry Clayton P15, Mike Hilton P16, and Anthony Gray classified P17. And in the AM running, meanwhile, we have a very close battle going on for the pro running, of course. Rosie Hodson P1, 216 points, great lead for her. Steve Knight P2, and Guy Swarbrick in P3, 151 points. This will be a great race for Guy in closing up to Steve Knight here. The gap now, Alan Matthews closing up to Willing Bliss as we have only 1/10 separating the front runners here as we head down towards the final part of the lap, heading now through turn 25, turn 26 in just a moment's time. Alan Matthews looking a little bit unsettled rather, and in fact too unsettled. There is Matt Daly taking P2 back from Alan Matthews, and now it's going to be Matt Daly's turn to try and catch up to Willing Bliss. But this battle going on between Alan Matthews and Matt Daly could have been exactly what Willing Bliss need in order to try and secure his race victory here, because that gap that at one point was looking threateningly close to 1 second now stands at half a second. We are on the penultimate lap at this point in time. The next lap will be the last lap of the race as we see the gap getting oh so close once again. This time Alan Matthews right on the rear wing of Matt Daly, trying his best to try and take back some pace off him through that slipstream and try and go side by side, as he has done so now, and will hopefully for his sake under braking be able to overtake Matt Daly. Has he done so? Not quite. Matt Daly looking very eager on the brakes and has a bit of a switchback heading into the second corner here, back into P2 for Matt Daly. This battling has cost him considerably as Willing Bliss is able to break away ever so slightly now. I say that at no point in this race has Willing Bliss enjoyed more than a 2-second delta to the cars behind. He has put up an impressive fight so far in this race, but Matt Daly with some great pace underneath him now. Could he be Willing Bliss's undoing now as we head into the first, or rather into the second sector here? No, he won't be. He's ran wide, he's run over the curbs, and that means Alan Matthews able to take back the position back into P2 for Alan Matthews, and there is Willing Bliss with a 1 second gap now. That's exactly what it needs at this stage in the race. He can breathe just that little bit easier now. That trophy looking a little bit closer owing to the misfortunes of the drivers behind here as Alan Matthews runs wide here. He took P2 back from Matt Daly. He's going to be back down in P3. In fact, he might be in P4. No, he keeps P3 for the time being, but is certainly looking a little bit lacking in terms of pace. So potentially Paul Brady out of nowhere fancies his chances for a spot on the podium. Here we go. Fantastic racing here, ladies and gentlemen, as we're on board with Matt Daly. He's 8/10 down on Willing Bliss. Can he pull out some Matt Daly magic as we head into the final part of the lap here? Let's just find out and see. Let's just wait and see rather, as Willing Bliss leads this race. 11 laps of some very stressy running, I imagine, as we have a contact between Andrew Whitehead. In fact, no, it's just two separate incidents. Andrew Whitehead and Barry Clayton heading off. I think it was contact between the two there. What a shame. Andrew Whitehead, his race rather becoming undone here. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but here we see Paul Brady very much trying his best to get the position on Alan Matthews as we head down towards turn 27 in just a moment. The all-important turn 27. They run out of this corner. If it hasn't mattered already in this race, it will matter so much more for Willing Bliss now, as Matt Daly makes huge innings on that delta between him and Willing Bliss. The gap now standing at 1/10 of a second. Will it all come undone on the run down to the start-finish line on the last lap? Matt Daly takes the lead of this race, and would you believe it, takes the race 1 victory. Does he? No, he does. Oh, that was oh so close. Only 400th of a second separating the two there, but it is Matt Daly who takes the race 1 victory, and it is Willing Bliss who settles for P2. Meanwhile, Alan Matthews coming home P3 is able to defend from Paul Brady in P4, as we have Andrew Brammer in P5. Jack Hodson will eventually come home P6. He's had a good recovery in this race, and then we have Paul Millman a little bit further down the order. What a finish. I apologise if you heard absolutely none of that, because it was nothing but clipping, but I was not expecting. What a finish, and commiserations to Willing Bliss. I'm sure he's utterly devastated in that blue-coloured 155 Ti there. It was a very hard-fought race indeed for Willing Bliss, and unfortunately the exit of that last corner, it caught him out in race 1. It caught him out in race 1. It caught him out in race 1 last week, of course, and it's caught him out here once again. Paul Millman comes home P7. Guy Swarbrick comes home P8. And commiserations to Willing. I can't imagine the devastation in the cockpit of that 155 Ti there. 400ths of a second separating them in the end there. Very close racing indeed. But it is Matt Daly who takes the race 1 victory. Will Inglis comes home P2 after a 25-minute long fight, after 12 laps of hard racing. Never had more than a 2-second delta to the cars behind, and finds himself now settling, shall we say, for the second spot on the podium. Alan Matthews rounds out that podium. Barry Clayton comes home P9. Rosie Hodgson comes home to take P10 on the road and takes P2 in the AM running. So good race for her in the end. And then we have Steve Knight coming home to take P3, rounding out the AM podium, of course, rounding out the AM running. Andrew Whitehead, another set of commiserations directed at him. Not sure what happened in this race. The soft compound tyre was tried. Didn't quite work out clearly. He's come home P12 on the road. A disaster of a race for him. Greg Young will be classified P13 rather. That was certainly an intriguing race 1, and that just makes me all the more excited for race 2, the reverse grid race, coming up in just a few minutes' time. So don't go anywhere. We'll catch you then. And welcome back to the action, ladies and gentlemen. What a finish to race 1 that was. If that is anything to go by, race 2 should be very exciting as well. Just over 30 seconds ago now until lights out. It is Andrew Whitehead on pole position, Steve Knight P2, Rosie Hodgson P3, Barry Clayton P4, Guy Swarwick P5, Paul Millman P6, Jack Hodgson P7, and then it is Andrew Rammer P8, Paul Brady P9, Alan Matthews P10, Will Inglis P11, Matt Daly P12, Greg Young P13. So the order has changed around. How will that come into effect in the race? Everyone this time on the medium compound tyre, including Andrew Whitehead. So I'm not quite sure if Andrew actually originally meant to be on the soft compound tyre. He's elected to choose that now. Either way, we have 6 red lights on the gantry away in just a second. And it is go now for race 2, the reverse grid race. As you see the cars already breaking formation, running down into turn 1. Andrew Whitehead and Steve Knight then. It's going to be Andrew Whitehead who gets ahead and gets a good start to race 2 here. Rosie Hodgson up into P3's contact between her and Guy Swarbrick. Not quite sure what happened there. I think that might have just been an unfortunate case of the concertina effect, a bit of bumper cars going on into that slower corner. Of course, so many cars heading into a relatively tight part of the circuit isn't quite going to work out. As we see Paul Millman spinning around as well as Jack Hodgson. Greg Young, unfortunately for him, he's not enjoyed this race weekend. We've just seen in the paddock he's unfortunately not particularly enamoured with this circuit, shall we say, and race 2 not starting in the way that he would have wanted either. Let's hopefully now he can find his rhythm, find his groove, and try and make it a couple of positions up for his troubles. As you see, Andrew Wyatt is still in P1. Of course, Barry Clayton gets the overtake done on Steve Knight up into P2 then for Barry Clayton. Good start for him. Likewise, Guy Swarbrick in P3, potentially under pressure though from Alan Matthews and Will Inglis and Matt Daly. So, of course, the 3 main protagonists for the podium in race 1 find themselves battling it out once again, this time for P5, P6 and P7 respectively. In fact, not respectively at all, ignore that. But I am sure they're going to be enjoying their battling as they try and scythe their way through the field to get back to the top of the running once again. They've certainly got the pace to do so. They demonstrated some excellent pace. Matt Daly jumping into the 2:15 area in race 1. As we see Guy Swarbrick jumping ahead of Steve Knight, as does Alan Matthews, as does Will Inglis, and as I suspect in just a moment's time will Matt Daly as well, and yes, he does so there. So that now means Barry Clayton is Andrew Whitehead's nearest rival. We didn't see, I feel, not too much representative pace from Andrew Whitehead in race 1, partly because we just weren't focusing on him. Apologies, Andrew. There was so much going on in race 1, we didn't quite have time to cover you too much in the end. But partly because, yes, we saw those soft compound tyres lighting up the track at the start of the race, as was expected. It would get them purple sectors, but as they wore out, obviously they're going to be a disadvantage more than an advantage, and towards the end of the race he ends up getting embroiled in battling traffic, and that meant I don't feel like we saw just what Andrew Whitehead can do at this circuit. So this race now, he's set up nicely, he's on the medium compound tyre, he's got a comfortable relatively comfortable 2-second gap to the car in P2. Let's see what times he can set now as he's trading purple sectors with his compatriots. Greg Young, unfortunately, retiring from the session and bringing an end to his racing action for this evening. As we see Barry Clayton in P2, 1.9 seconds behind Andrew Whitehead. Meanwhile, Guy Swarbrick is rather a cork in the bottle, it must be said, for Alan Matthews, Will Inglis and Matt Daly as we run down through the first sector there. Guy Swarbrick gets a bit of understeer, clatters into the wall, is able to recover actually in relatively good stead, and no major ill effects as a result of that, apart from, I imagine, his front and rear wing. I got confirmation of that on my screen actually, are completely demolished. So he'll be losing a little bit of grip there. He drops back down into P6, but actually, all things considered, not too major of an impact for him there. So it is Alan Matthews who, out of the protagonists from race 1, finds himself in P3. He's in very good stead indeed. But Will Inglis hot on his heels there. Matt Daly not too far behind either. Neither is Paul Brady. So it's going to be a very interesting battle in the mid-pack at this point in time. I don't know how long it's going to stay in the mid-pack, but for now it is in the mid-pack. Meanwhile, Andrew Whitehead controlling this race nicely, still setting the purple sectors. Say 38.8 on that previous lap. Of course, full load of fuel on board. Medium tyres this time around in comparison to his previous soft, so he's going to be spending probably a little bit of time learning how the car behaves on the medium compound tyres in race trim, and will then be kind of settling in a little bit more and controlling the race, as he's doing a very good job of at this point in time, it must be said. Alan Matthews and Will Inglis, meanwhile, enjoying a bit of a battle, involved Matt Daly in that as well. It's a three-way battle once again between these 3 drivers. It's just a little bit further down in comparison to race 1. This time around, of course, something we didn't see in race 1. Alan Matthews leads, of course, we didn't see for any major time at all. Alan Matthews leads this race with Will Inglis right behind Matt Daly alongside him as well. Are we going to have a potential 3 wide here? No, Matt Daly seems to favour the outside entry into the final corner. It certainly worked for him, of course, in race 1. It gave him the race 1 victory after 25 minutes of hard racing. That was the tactic that in the end settled it for Matt Daly. But we see Alan Matthews, Will Inglis now side by side as we run down to that first corner once again. Alan Matthews rather gives up the position to Will Inglis. Will Inglis now in P3. He's got a spot on the podium. What can he do now in terms of trying to dispatch of Alan Matthews? Alan Matthews, of course, he'll be now begging Alan. Will Inglis will be begging Alan to keep Matt Daly behind at all costs. He was able to do so he was able to keep Matt Daly busy for quite a lot of race 1. Towards the end, that waned, unfortunately, for Will Inglis, because that, in the end, allowed Will Inglis to enjoy a battle with Matt Daly on the start-finish straight of the final lap. This time around, though, Will Inglis will be hoping that Matt Daly or Alan Matthews, rather. Apologies if I've confused with all the names being thrown about. Alan Matthews, Will Inglis. So we'll try it again. Give it a minute. Will Inglis will be hoping that Alan Matthews can keep Matt Daly behind. Understood? Okay, good, great. Now, Barry Clayton has had an issue now. Moving on, he's made contact with Paul Brady. He's gone into the wall, has Barry Clayton. Paul Brady losing time as a result of that as well. Barry Clayton, for so long, running quite nicely in P2, finds himself now all the way down in P7. But where has this come from? Will Inglis now, all of a sudden, only half a second off Andrew Whitehead. Andrew Whitehead classes a wall on the outside of the circuit there. He's going to lose a lot of front wing there as a result. He has. It's a 30-mile-an-hour collision with the wall. That is a big impact for Andrew Whitehead. And there we see now Will Inglis only 0.2 of a second, 1/10 of a second off the rear end of Andrew Whitehead's car. They're going to be side by side now as we run down towards the end of Sector 2. And a little bit of oversteer creeping in for Will Inglis. He headed into that corner quite pacey indeed. A lot of speed, a lot of momentum being carried into the corner. That's cost him some time. It's cost him a large amount of time, in fact. It looked like if he just waited perhaps a little bit later into the lap, he could have got the move done on Andrew Whitehead. He wanted to get it done a little bit earlier. That has cost him, because there is now Alan Matthews with the inside heading into the final corner. Who's winning later on the brakes? It's going to be Alan Matthews later on the brakes, and now has P2. In fact, Will Inglis looking potentially for a second. He could be in P4, because here is Matt Daly. Matt Daly very cautiously, as he does through turn 27 every single time, enters that braking zone, and now with a nice clean run through that final corner is side by side with Will Inglis. Will Inglis at one point was 1/10 off the lead of this race. Now finds himself in P4. Very close battling at the front end of the field here. As we run through the first corner once again, it is Andrew Whitehead who still leads after all of that. Alan Matthews only 1 second behind him now. Half a second behind him is Will Inglis. Will Inglis looking a little bit unsettled, actually, it must be said. Dropping off the back of Matt Daly just that little bit more. Could this be his chance at redemption for race one, coming to a premature end? I certainly hope not for his sake. He's demonstrated some great pace and certainly deserves a race win. Unfortunately for him, there's about 4 other cars around him that also deserve this race win. It is a very close field at the top end here at the Jeddah Corniche circuit. A little bit of oversteer creeping in for Matt Daly's car here. Hopefully that shouldn't affect him too much. For his sake, it doesn't look like it has. Will Inglis potentially just a little bit more pace in his car at this point in the track, but there's much of a muchness really. There's not too much between these cars at all. And we see the action just for a second slightly waning. I say that though, the top 5 covered by just 2.5 seconds. That is impressive running indeed. In fact, the top 3 only 1.5 seconds. So that averages out to about half a second car. Very impressive indeed. As we see, in fact, no, ignore me completely. That's completely off. But we see that Andrew Whitehead had a big issue on the exit of the corner there, and is now side by side with Alan Matthews. Not for long though. Alan Matthews up into the lead of this race. Andrew Whitehead now carrying a lot of damage, and I fear. Remember me saying that we will finally get a chance to see Andrew Whitehead's representative pace? That might have disappeared now, owing to his front aero damage. Now we see he's battling Matt Daly for P2. Is able to defend for the time being. That brings Will Inglis back into play here. If Will Inglis can get ahead of Matt Daly, he can once again potentially have a shout at the lead of the race. Let's see. It's all to play for between the top 4, potentially the top 5 as well. Don't count out Paul Brady here. It's all to play for here at the Jeddah Corniche circuit. We head on to the start-finish straight once again, where Will Inglis, all of his efforts were undone. I imagine now he has PTSD from that final corner. It's not caught him out. It's been the undoing of him on 2 separate occasions now, and they were very, very important occasions indeed. Both times they settled the lead of the race. Both times they snatched the lead of the race away from him, he feels, I'm sure, in the cockpit of that car. But meanwhile, Andrew Whitehead only half a second off Alan Matthews. I feared maybe Andrew Whitehead was just a little bit unsettled, potentially, maybe starting to kind of lose his rhythm, potentially. He was able to settle back in, has made a good recovery in this race. Is certainly struggling with the understeer. Just look at how that car is handling it. It's not handling it at its best. He's not able to drive it at his best, unfortunately, because of that. And he's heading through the corners, missing apexes, and that is allowing him to slip back into the jaws of Matt Daly. Matt Daly now fancying his chances at an overtake, and is able to get the move done this time around, but is certainly going to attempt it in just a few moments' time, I am sure. Let's see now as we head down towards the second sector of this lap. Alan Matthews actually able to break away just that little bit more as these 4 behind are battling so much. Will Inglis not quite in the jaws of Paul Brady just yet, and probably just waiting to pounce on the cars up in front, as Barry Clayton very courteously getting out of the way there. Well done, Barry, to find a great place to allow traffic through, and very courteous of you indeed. Of course, we don't have blue flags in this series, as Andrew Whitehead has a big impact with the wall there. That is going to cost him a lot of speed, and it does so. It is now Matt Daly up into P2, Andrew Whitehead dropping back into P3. What will Willing-Gliss do now? Willing-Gliss should be spurred on a little bit by the sights up in front of him, and fancies his chances back for another podium here once again. But yes, of course, blue flag's not a part of racing here, but it is great to see the courtesy between drivers, as it is now side by side, Andrew Whitehead and Matt Daly. Andrew Whitehead actually now back in front of Matt Daly once again. Matt Daly has the inside line though, as we head down towards that final corner once again. All this battling is helping Alan Matthews' cause immensely, as I've turned the force feedback up for my car. You'll be very pleased to know indeed. As we head now through that final corner, try it again. Matt Daly has the inside line there and is able to dispatch of Andrew Whitehead. Running onto that start-finish straight, he builds his gap to Andrew Whitehead, but rather interestingly loses a little bit of time to Alan Matthews. Alan Matthews now controlling this race with a 2-second gap, a consistent 2-second gap as well, unlike what we saw in race 1. Willing-Gliss, meanwhile, very much still in the mix here, as is Paul Brady. Paul Brady actually has had a good couple of laps, has just been consistent. While all of the top 4 have been kind of trading places and having a look up the inside, swapping apexes, trading paint, all that sort, Paul Brady has just been sat a little bit behind, just a few more tenths behind, and has been setting consistent laps, 2:16s, maybe 2:17s here or there, and is now very much in the mix. Look at this now, in that Martini liveried car here. He's not having a look up the inside just yet, but he's certainly threatening Willing-Gliss. Willing-Gliss, who at one point was probably quite content with getting back on the podium, might now be fearing that he's going to drop back into P5 if he doesn't play his cards right, because here is Paul Brady with some great pace, great consistency. He's had a very good race so far, and race 2 is certainly panning out that way as well as we approach the halfway stage. In fact, it's going to be the halfway stage on the dot, if we ignore the final lap towards the end. Wasn't that? Alan, that played out rather nicely indeed. Which brings us on to how the championship is looking after race 1. We're going to go on board with Andrew Whitehead while we do that, because Andrew is certainly an interesting card, an interesting player here in this top 5 battling. Just like you point out, Matt Daly has been able to break away from him now and is now doing his best to catch up to Alan Matthews, as unfortunately we lose Barry Clayton from this race as well. In fact, Willing-Gliss ahead now of Andrew Whitehead. I think Andrew Whitehead had a slow run through those past couple of corners, because here is now Paul Brady side by side with Andrew Whitehead as we run it down towards the final corner. Paul Brady forcing him wide there, gets the overtake done. Paul Brady up into P4 then. Willing-Gliss meanwhile back on the podium. In all of this battling, we've had this battle of 5 has now spread into a battle of 2 and then a battle of 3 as well. It's split. This little mini pack has split somewhat, and that has allowed Matt Daly to forget about what's going on behind him and is now very much laser focused on catching up to the car behind. If things go his way on this lap, he could be in the 2:14s here. Look, ladies and gentlemen, bottom left-hand corner, predicted a 2-minute 15.1. Has lost a bit of time here on this lap, but that is an impressive lap time indeed. A little bit of oversteer won't help his cause on the exit of that final corner there. But in his attempt to catch up to Alan Matthews, which has gone very well, it must be said, we start the next lap now, only 0.2 of a second separating these two cars. It's going to be a 2:15.1 on this lap for Matt Daly. Very impressive time indeed. That would have been competitive in qualifying, and if you can find a couple more tenths, that would have seen him on pole in qualifying, which is impressive because we've got half a race worth of fuel on board. Is on a medium tyre, and is a worn medium tyre at that. Although we did see a couple of cars running the medium in qualifying, owing to the long, sweeping, high-energy nature of this circuit. 3/10 separating Matt Daly and Alan Matthews, and Willing-Gliss in relative no man's land in this pack of 5. Paul Brady in P4, Andrew Brammer in P5. Why is that? Andrew Whitehead has some substantial damage by the looks of things, or is retiring from the race. What a shame. This race weekend really not panning out the way that he would have wanted. It is a shame to see. He had some great pace underneath him, as does Matt Daly, though, as we head back on board with these two. They're heading down into turn 2. The big hairpin coming up, but it's going to be the braking zone into that big hairpin. That makes a difference for Matt Daly. He takes the race lead. Can he keep it now on the exit of the corner? He's looking very composed indeed, and there is a half a second race lead already for Matt Daly. Now, Matt Daly now leads this race. This could be a near enough Matt Daly Grand Slam. It was, if he was able to keep it in qualifying, it was certainly going to be a Matt Daly Grand Slam. However, Willing-Gliss was an impressive pace all weekend. Takes the pole accolade, of course. So it'd be a near enough Grand Slam for Matt Daly if he's able to maintain this race lead. Just 10 minutes, or just under 10 minutes to go in this race now, rather. And we have a look at the championship to find that John Cole, of course, unfortunately not here this evening. loses out in terms of his lead to Matt Daly. And if things stay this way, it is going to be Matt Daly who leads the championship as things stand. This has been a very important race weekend indeed for Matt Daly. It looked like John Cole starting to break away in the season just that little bit, but Matt Daly has been able to swing it back, swing that momentum back into his hands, and it is very impressive indeed. Meanwhile, we're going to go on board with Steve Knight. He's battling out with Jack Hodson. Jack Hodson has some great pace underneath him. Steve Knight, of course, was at one point on pole in this race. They're going to be side by side then, or near enough, makes no difference as we head down towards Sector 3. And it is going to be Jack Hodson who eventually gets the overtake done on Steve Knight and up into 8th on the road for Jack Hodson. Some good points then this weekend for Jack. Speaking of the points, we go back on board with Matt Daly leading this race, of course, to the tune of 1.7 seconds. Although that oversteer certainly will not help his cause. In fact, he was sliding all the way through the turn 1, turn 2 complex. How many tenths has he lost as a result? Well, he's lost at least a quarter of a second. It's not exactly world-ending, but it's not the type of mistake he wants to be making at this stage. We saw with Will Inglis how very small errors late on into the running can have a major effect on your race weekend. Just look at how turn 1 ended for Will in both the round 5 of the single-seater action and round 6 here this evening. But Matt Daly then stands to take the championship lead after this weekend. Not to be outdone, Alan Matthews will still take a good number of points. He's currently P3 in the standings, 149 points. Nathan Birch, unfortunately, didn't make it to race 2 either. He will be losing out as a result of that. Greg Young, likewise, a 939 Corse team. Unfortunately for them, not a race weekend to remember. Unfortunately, they are very much focused on the upcoming action. And then we have George Brook, not here this evening. Andrew Whitehead, again, unfortunately for him, a race weekend to forget. So we're going to have quite a momentum shift in the championship after this. Paul Brady up into P8 after the previous race, level pegging with Andrew Whitehead, actually. He'll have another good innings here and could be ahead, and will in fact be ahead of the cars in front of him. Will Inglis, P9, 56 points. Not quite the amount of points you wanted to take away from race 1, but still a good points haul regardless. Jack Hodson, likewise, 56 points alongside Will Inglis. Andrew Whitehead, P11, Andrew Harper, P12, Paul Millman, P13, Barry Clayton, P14, Rob Whitney, P15, Mike Hilton, P16, and Anthony Gray, P17. Then in the AM running, it is Rosie Hodson who still leads the AM charge, 234 points to her name. Steve Knight, 183, and Guy Sawbridge closing in on Steve Knight, 176. Of course, it is Guy Sawbridge who leads the AM charge. So as things stand, there will be a change in positions in the AM running. And apologies for the small intermission there, but yeah, we are back once again. Matt Daly, it must be said, now controlling this race with just over 5 minutes to go. The oversteer potentially creeping in a little bit there, but still, look at that predicted lap time, a 2 minute 14.8. That is blistering. That would have seen him on pole in qualifying, as I believe Rosie Hodson has had a bit of an issue, is able to continue on, but that car looking a little bit worse for wear, that is for sure. If you haven't caught, by the way, the most recent podcast featuring Rosie Hodson, I thoroughly suggest you go and watch that. It was a great episode, but not a race weekend to remember for Rosie, really, or not a race 2 rather to remember for Rosie. As Alan Matthews now at 1 point leading this race, now settles into about settles in quite comfortably, shall we say, to P2, about 3 seconds off Matt Daly, but has a comfortable margin to Will Inglis behind. Andrew Brammer in all this finds himself in P4. Paul Brady rather. Muddling up the names tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I do apologise. Paul Brady settling for P5 in the end. I'm not quite sure what happened there. The pace potentially dropping off or some type of issue sees him down in P5. Will Inglis has a major issue there. He's down in P4 now. And towards the end of the race is where it all seems to come undone for Will Inglis so far in this season's action. Just narrowly avoids Paul Brady. That is one of the downsides of the Jeddah Corniche circuit. Now down in P5. What a shame. It was going to be another good points haul, but unfortunately it still will be, just not quite the points he would have wanted into P5 for Will Inglis. Now Andrew Brammer, this will be a great bolster to his championship fight. Of course, he's currently P11, 20 points to his name, currently running in P3 on the road, rounding out the podium as things stand. This could be a very good and very important weekend indeed for him. He's showed good pace. We didn't see too much of it in race 1, apart from the odd mention when I unfortunately mistook him for another driver, and I apologise to both drivers once again. But Andrew Brammer now finds himself in P3 on the road. Has had a couple of quiet races here. Has just been setting in some good laps and has been rewarded for it, it must be said. I believe either Alan Matthews has had further issues because he's dropped back a little bit from Matt Daly, or Matt Daly, it's just Matt Daly. What else? There's no other explanation for it. Matt Daly has just been consistently lapping in 2-minute 14s, and that is why he's broken away from the rest of the field. He has utterly controlled this race since he's taken the lead of it, and we do have some viewers' comments for you, and it certainly brings evidence to this idea of the race has just been Matt Daly. John Cole is tuned in and is watching, so good to have you on board, John. And he does comment on just how great the racing is at the top end of the fields, and it certainly has been. But also note how Will did in the end towards race 1, as he put it, got Daly'd. And I think the entire field has just been Daly'd here in race 2, John, because look at the pace there. 2-minute 14.5 this time around. I think the only reason John isn't here is he just wanted to make that championship just a little bit more interesting for him, as they are, of course, going to be on effectively level pegging heading in to the next touring car round. But we're just watching Matt Daly, like an old 50s F1 car, four-wheel sliding that car around the Jeddah Corniche circuit. It is an absolute sight to behold, it must be said, comfortably in the 214s, and is looking in good stead in this race, although don't count anything out yet. We've certainly seen how fortunes can be changed later on into the races, and here is, speaking of fortune change, look at that. At one point, these two battling it out. They are occupying the same part of the screen once again. However, this time it is Andrew Whitehead one lap down and effectively last in this race. He swapped onto the soft compound tire just to get some good laps in, maybe hoping to capitalise on any issues that occur in front of him. But what a weekend to forget really for Andrew Whitehead. It has been. Of course, we've only got 15 cars in the grid when we start the race weekend, so you'd expect, you know, kind of 7 tails of fortune, 7 tails of misfortune, and then kind of a couple of meh races for people overall. But I can't really think of, apart from Matt Daly, who has had an enjoyable weekend here. Alan Matthews has had a good run as well. Andrew Brammer, Paul Brady has actually made a good recovery, all things considered. But who has come out of this thinking, yes, everything that could have gone right did go right. Guy Schwarberg's actually had, given he's had a couple of run-ins with a wall here, just look at the car there, he's actually had a relatively good recovery in this race, currently leading the AM race, but certainly it seems to be more tales of misfortune than fortune here this weekend at the Jeddah Corniche circuit. It's certainly been an action-packed one though. I thoroughly enjoyed tagging along for it. As we go back aboard once again with Matt Daly, we are now approximately 10 laps into this race. He's still setting the purple sectors and controlling this race rather nicely. And as the drivers now begin to settle into a bit of a rhythm, a bit of a groove, they start to kind of occupy the part of the track that they're comfortable occupying, and there's no major incidents occurring on track at this point in time. I just want to mention, though, Andrew Whitehead now setting his fastest laps of the race. Of course, lower fuel load, fresh, soft tyres, and a nice rubbered up track to boot. What a shame. He's demonstrated some great pace. Unfortunately, it just wasn't to be in this weekend's racing, unfortunately. But Matt Daly then is controlling this race and controlling it rather nicely. Now, only 4 seconds down from Andrew Brammer is Paul Brady. Now, if you compare their pace at the moment on the previous lap, Paul Brady at 2-minute 17.3 in comparison to Andrew Brammer's 2-minute 23.1. So clearly a bit of an issue for Andrew Brammer on that previous lap. And in terms of overall pace, Paul Brady actually wins out to 2-minute 16.8 in comparison to Andrew Brammer's 2-minute 16.9. So a very small advantage, but an advantage nonetheless for Paul Brady. Now we have got to the very end of this lap. Now we are this will be the penultimate lap, in fact. So in one lap, can Paul Brady catch up to Andrew Brammer? It's going to be a tall order, but it's certainly been done before. So let's just wait and see if that is the case, ladies and gentlemen. We'll have a look at the lap times for this lap as we go across the line in just a moment's time. It's a 2-minute 18 on this lap for Andrew Brammer. Has Andrew taken too much out of his tyres in order to get onto a spot on the podium? It's of course what any racing driver would do. It's what I would do. But could he now be just in a kind of preservation mode, could be just looking after those tyres, could he just be trying to nurse the car home at this point in time. This will play into Paul Brady's hands, of course. He's now quite comfortably in the 2 minutes 16 range and is gaining time, in fact, as the fuel load gets lighter and as he catches up ever so slightly to Andrew Brammer. He'll be spurred on by that fact, of course. We are now on the final lap with Matt Daly, so we're going to have to go on board with him in just a moment's time, but we're going to keep one eye on what is going on between Andrew Brammer and Paul Brady now. Could be a very interesting late race development indeed. There is, in the distance, what a shame, it is Will Inglis who is running in P5, some fairly competent pace in his car as well, just not where he would have wanted to have been, which is a great shame. Heading now down towards that big hairpin for Matt Daly, and we've seen him on a number of occasions throughout this race weekend as he has a lock-up heading into the corner. We've seen him on a number of occasions make some great overtaking attempts, sometimes an overtake stuck, but it maybe doesn't have quite that same challenge as he heads around that corner this time round. He's managed to make a 15-second gap when you consider we're only about halfway into the race when he eventually took the race lead. It was a great effort from him as he four-wheel slides into the wall this time round. Perhaps the tyre starting to give up now on Matt Daly's car as we head into that middle sector. And it is Matt Daly, of course, who definitely leads this race at this point in time with no major worries from any cars behind. Then into Sector 3 as we navigate the highest speed parts of the circuit. These cars actually posting a very respectable speed indeed of around 147 miles an hour in Matt Daly's case. He is, in terms of top speed, the quickest car on track. This is, of course, an open setup championship. That could have helped him just that little bit, but I think most of the great performance we've seen this evening is completely down to just some excellent skill in terms of Matt Daly. John Cole is watching on and will be watching on with bated breath to see his championship advantage disappear as Matt Daly classes the wall on the exit of that final corner. That exit of the final corner, which has gifted him race victory before, very nearly snatches it away from him. He's able to recover, but will be losing a lot of momentum as a result. He will get underway. He has made it just a little bit more difficult for himself, but he crosses the line to take the race to victory. Congratulations, Matt Daly. Complete domination, thoroughly deserved, and that is a flourish for a finish there, if ever I have seen one. As we're going to get another one in just a moment's time as he starts the victory donuts, as he is drifting his way around the track already. It is Alan Matthews who comes out in P2. Great race for him in the end. Andrew Brammer, after two very well executed races, rounds out the podium here in race 3 and takes the race 3 victory. Congratulations. Doesn't take the race 3 victory, takes the race 3 third spot on the podium. As we have some donuts already from Andrew Whitehead, I believe that is, as Paul Brady comes out in P4, and then commiserations with Inglis. Still some good points on the board, still some good points to add to your tally, but P5 in the end for Will Inglis. Paul Millman, great recovery for him in the end, only 10 seconds off P5, comes home in P6. Jack Hodson likewise, not too far off at all, comes home P7, and then we have a little bit of a wait to the AM race leader. Guy Swarbrick on board with him as he crosses the line to take the race 2 victory for the AM class here at Jeddah. Well done, Guy, for that one. And then we have Steve Knight will be coming home to P9 in just a moment, as will Rosie Hodson, as we have Andrew Whitehead then completes his victory donuts. Do we have any more? We have some from Andrew Whitehead, I believe. We've had some from Will Inglis. We have a bit of bumper cars going on between Jack and Will, and then we have some more victory slides from Matt Daly there. That's a very impressive one, actually. I'm glad we're on board for that one round the hairpin. That is a great way to end the evening's running, as Steve Knight comes home P9, and then Rosie Hodson will be classified P10. Unfortunately, I've got to bring the stream to an end here, but that was a fantastic evening's racing. There, we found some victory donuts. Great to see. I refuse to end the stream until we've seen some victory donuts. Thank you, Alan Matthews. Thank you, Andrew Brammer, for taking on that very important role indeed. That was a fantastic evening's racing here at the Jeddah Corniche circuit. Certainly some misfortunes for some, but some excellent racing for others. So I hope you've enjoyed watching as much as I've enjoyed commentating. I'll catch you in a week's time for the single-seater action, and then in a fortnight's time for the next round of the touring car racing. So thank you very much from me.